One of the biggest things I see is trying to connect with everybody. Some people are just throwing darts at the board. Even when it comes to me, I am very helpful. I love to help people, but my background is in clinical operations. I do not, hide that. And so sometimes I get why people come to me, but then I also redirect them of, be mindful of who you're talking about and what experience they bring to the table. I think a lot of people get shot down because they're just like, they're a clinical researcher. Let me talk to them, and not a clinical researcher who is on a similar path that can actually help them. I believe people are definitely more willing to help if they have knowledge to pull from versus you just saying, I want to be in clinical research, because that could mean any and everything at this point.
Today on the TMF Daily Podcast, we're sitting down with Elizabeth Tabor, the CEO and founder of the Clinical Research Referral Club, a visionary who is flipping the script on how professionals, businesses, and patients connect in clinical research. We're talking next level networking. We're not just swapping business cards, not just another LinkedIn connection. CRRC is a powerhouse networking community designed to fuel careers and spark real collaborations. This episode is for you if you're trying to break into the industry, level up your career, or build connections that actually matter. Elizabeth, welcome to the TMF Daily Podcast.
Thank you, Nicole, for such a great introduction. When you read it, I was like, oh, you're talking about me. So I really appreciate that.
You've earned it, and we're so excited to have you on the show. Like, you've built the Clinical Research Referral Club from the ground up. Like, what was that vision that sparked it all? And like, how did you turn that vision into a reality?
So going into clinical research, I struggled, and it did not take me long to realize that connections matter in this industry. That is what moves the needle forward in your career. So once I realized that, in the beginning, I went all in on LinkedIn and I had saw great success. However, once I had reached my goal of being a CRA, I had let my network die, and I was like, oh, okay, I don't really need it like how I did. And as I was looking forward to growing my own career, at that point, I was like, I need my network again. And just being back on LinkedIn and seeing all the people that have been impacted by layoffs or just even not happy in their own careers, I realized that, I needed to be the change that I needed to see. So instead of just worrying about building my network again, I was like, let me help other people build their network, because people say network, but nobody actually teaches people how to network. And people don't realize that it's a skill that you have to actually practice and learn. It's not something that just comes natural.
Networking is literally everything in clinical research. Like, you know that. So, like, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see people making when they're trying to build those connections in the industry?
I would say one of the biggest things I see is trying to connect with everybody. Some people are just throwing darts at the board. Even when it comes to me, I, am very helpful. I love to help people, but my background is in clinical operations. I do not, hide that. And so sometimes I get why people come to me, but then I also redirect them of, be mindful of who you're talking about and what experience they bring to the table. I think a lot of people get shot down because they're just like, oh, they're a clinical researcher. Let me talk to them, and not a clinical researcher who is on a similar path that can actually help them. I believe people are definitely more willing to help if they have knowledge to pull from versus you just saying, I want to be in clinical research, because that could mean any and everything at this point.
Yeah. Or can you get me a job?
Yeah, that's also one. And I tell people, unless you see hiring manager, recruiter, even with us about referrals, I tell people the first thing you should do is not start with your ask. Start with why you even want to ask them anything, especially, commenting and supporting them. Support goes both ways. So even if you're new or transitioning, it's important to figure out how else you can support that person that you're reaching out to, even if it's lending credibility to their experience.
So, how does the Clinical Research Referral Club help its members go beyond that surface level connection and actually create those meaningful, impactful relationships?
One of the first things we do is we offer a platform without the noise. So we have our own platform where it's just clinical researchers. So I would say there people can focus. It's very easy to get distracted on LinkedIn. The first thing you see is clinical research. The next thing you see maybe about superheroes. So, with that type of distraction, it can kind of be hard to focus and figure out who. And then also from there, we offer networking events. So with that, it's consistent networking events. And with our events, we do not have our members go in blind. We have conversation starters, we have exit strategies, and we continue to do that and take that feedback from members. And then, as a step further, we give out tools, templates, and guides of this is how you use AI to draft a resume, how to draft a connection message. This is how you should structure your LinkedIn. So, tools, templates, resources, videos, and then practice. We just give a space for a lot of practice. Most people, the first time that they really have to network is in high stake environments. You're trying to land something. And when there's a lot of pressure on doing it right, that's when you get tongue tied. So just giving them that space to be confident in what they offer. So by the time that it is in a high impact situation, they've already shaken off those nerves.
You mentioned something interesting about nerves and the confidence. With your program, how do you handle or teach when you're networking and you're sending those DMs and they're getting ghosted?
When they are getting ghosted, I ask them, for some people, I ask them, let me see what you sent. Typically, the ghosted offenders, they are sending novels. And I'm like, nobody is going to read that. And then also, they come out of nowhere. One of the things I've done to, get people to be willing to talk to me is I interacted with their content. I always tell people before you even send a connection request, see if this person's active on LinkedIn. All pages are run by a real person. They see every like, comment, share. So I always say, before you reach their DMs, put a like, put a comment, so you're just not another name in the inbox. And with the way the industry is going, I feel like people have hesitation about opening messages from people that they don't know, just because they have that like, oh man, they're about to ask me for something type of mentality. Start building the relationship before you get to the inbox. I mean, even myself, I am honestly more likely to respond to people's names that I've seen a couple times than people that I be like, I haven't seen this. I don't know anything about you. This, message could be whatever. Because with outreach, they have to realize the recipient also has to be respectful of their time. And just because you're sending a message doesn't mean that you're guaranteed a response.
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple things to unpack right there. One thing that really stood out for me, and it probably does for you too, is when someone likes and comments on your content, because you're big in content too. And sometimes the people who like can get lost in the sauce because likes are easy, but it's the people who comment you remember that name
Yes.
because not a lot of people are afraid to comment, I think. It's easy to like, but to actual put thought into a comment, that's where I'm like, who is this person? Let me go to their page. And then I start investigating. I want to know more about them.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. That's where I was going to go with that. I'm going to say the people that actually comment, they spark my curiosity as well. I think with being a content creator, people kind of sometimes have that separation that we are humans and, we react to the same things most people react to. So, just as, you've shown interest in me, I'm now interested in you. There have been plenty times people have commented, and that prompted me to reach out to them.
Mm-hmm.
Making the first move is important, and it could just be in a non-pressure way. Because sometimes you don't want to be pressured into talking to people, and I think comments kind of lower that pressure of let's start building a relationship organically. Because I see that there's potential for us to collaborate and that we have shared interests.
Mm-hmm. It's really that easy. And I think people overcomplicate it. Like that one comment can just transform and turn into a connection so easy.
Yeah, I mean, hey, that's actually how I met you. First
Touche.
I was commenting and seeing what you were putting out there. And then I was like, okay, I have something to talk to you with you about. And I think that also helps, make the conversation flow easier because you now understand where your shared interests are and you're
Mhm.
not just going into a conversation trying to find out what you're talking about.
Right. And then that DM becomes a little bit less intimidated when you see it. And you're like, I know that name. I remember them. And then you're more likely to want to comment back.
Yes, I would say friendliness is definitely important and not just messages. For me, I get messages and sometimes for me, it's just too much. So I'm going to say the commenters are the ones that, I do feel a little more comfortable in because I at least have had some interaction. Versus people where no interaction at all. And I feel like, wow, this is a lot of responsibility to try to build from nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Which leads me to let's talk about impact. How has CRRC changed the game for clinical researchers looking to advance their careers and really leave a mark on this industry?
I think it's changing it by breaking down the silos that we've been having. Ever since I've started, I can at least say that my timeline is much more connected. I actually see people engaging with each other, sharing across borders, disciplines, backgrounds. Before this, like I said, I did not see too many interactions. It was the clinical operations talking to the clinical operations, the data managers talking to the data managers, TMF talking to TMF. So I would say that that's the impact that I've been seeing, that people realize that it's important to talk to people across all departments in clinical research and, getting your foot in the door. It does not necessarily have to be from somebody who is exactly on the same path as you, but, realizing that your shared interest is clinical research and that looks different for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And that's important too, just talking with people in different backgrounds and clinical research because you never know where it's going to lead you, where somebody might know somebody or you're interested in what they're doing. And maybe that might be your potential career path down the line.
Yes, and I also think it gives you a leg up career wise. When you talk to people in different departments, you can understand what their pain points are. And if your department works with them, you could be that person that fixes the bottleneck because you've at least heard it from both sides or, experienced on one side and heard it. So I think people, downplayed that value of connecting with people in different departments and how that could be your secret weapon of understanding what they're doing and how that's impacting the efficiency of your work.
Mm-hmm. And this might be a little bit taboo, but I want to get
Mhm.
your take on it with networking. And it's about money. What are your thoughts on when networking? Say you know the person, you're comfortable talking to them, say you've known them 3 to 6 months. Do you ever talk about salary? Hey, you're at CRO, academia. I'm making this a year. What are you making? Or we just leave it off the table?
Oh no, I do not leave it off the table. Just being a black woman, statistics have shown that, I'm more likely to get paid less. So to protect myself professionally, it's always something that I have discussed. How I handle that and not make people uncomfortable is I ask them, do you make above or below X amount? With that, that helps me understand even where I am in that. But I believe that everybody should ask about salary. Companies, they kind of make it seem like if you talk about it, you'll be out the door. But truly, that is where pay equality comes from, of knowing that, this is a $40 hour job and you're at 29. I mean, I've had colleagues that I ask them, just kind of hearing about their daily life, because people talk about where they're spending their money at, and hearing that conversation, even I bring it up to them to make sure that they're getting fairly compensated. Of kind of like, I heard you, but let me tell you where I am, and then let's talk about where you are. So I think that that can go in both ways, not only making sure that you're getting paid fairly, but to also look out for the people in your network to ensure that they're getting compensated fairly as well.
I love that. This is like one of the barriers that I think we need to just like break down because people are always so scared to like talk about money. And I think we should be open about it.
Yeah, especially with everybody, griping about companies not posting the salary range. And I figure if you're not willing to ask what they actually pay in that range, why does the salary range matter? You're
Right.
going to just take what they give you anyways. So I think that, talking about it gives you negotiation power and really understanding where your skills lie and what skills you need to develop. Because some skills pay more than others in certain departments, and that can help you tailor your own career plan of I'm looking to build this specific skill because this is the one attached to the higher money in that range.
So, what's the one thing clinical research professionals are really getting wrong about networking? It's holding them back from those opportunities that they're looking for.
I would say this industry for so long has had people kind of hide in the shadows and be scared to speak up. But I think that a lot of people get wrong speaking up and what that looks like. I talk about speaking up, and there are ways about it being defiant or, not acceptable. And speaking up is not always questioning authority. So understanding that you can speak up, but sharing that you have value to the conversation and that you may have seen something from a different angle that really could move it forward. So yes, I'm going to say being scared to get out in front is what I see, because so many people are worried about the backlash of I spoke up in this meeting, did I say the right thing? And we all say the wrong thing sometimes, but you never get comfortable if you don't say it, especially mid-career professionals. Oftentimes they get stuck there and they wonder why. They say, I've done the work. And I'm like, you've done the work, but have you talked to the people who are making the decisions? Because they cannot say, hey, you're ready for this job. And they have no idea what your personality is like, because that is now your coworker, not the people that you were immediately working with, because you're now trying to move up to their level. So they're trying to see, do I even like you to, be in these meetings? Yeah, people think interviews are about skills. Interviews is about likability, because they're trying to figure out, can I work with you?
Right. Yeah. At the end of the day, can I work with you and are you a good fit with the team?
Yes. So
Or
I
are
say
you too expensive?
that too. Are you too expensive? But I would say for those that get the too expensive, you're still worth it. That is my message to them, because they're saying that, and you cannot, downplay somebody's expertise. I've been on studies where I've noticed they've cut a couple corners on experience, and it backfires on them, because they then have to then still bring in the person who is more experienced to support the one who they were like, we're going to go with them because they were willing to accept a lower price.
And it costs them more money in the end.
More money in the end. And then also I think that really breaks down team dynamics.
Yeah.
Hiring people based on the amount of salary that they are willing to accept is not always the best, because if it's a leader and they don't know how to lead, and that's not to say not to give them an opportunity, but that trickles down to their teammates and what other people are doing and really can slow down progress.
So if you were starting like from scratch today, try and break down like into clinical research, what would the networking strategy look like? What's the game plan?
Okay, so my game plan would be one, getting people to associate with me other than my name. Elizabeth is a pretty common name. Most people have common names. So I'm going to say building a brand outside of my name on a piece of paper, that would be first. Look at the big companies, but then working my way back to the smaller ones. One of my favorite tips I tell people is look at the big companies. LinkedIn tells you what other pages people follow, and start looking at the ones you've never heard the name of. And then, two, when it comes to resumes, what I do and used to do is that instead of asking people to review my resume, I ask people to see their resume because they're exactly where I want to be. So I would say building my documentation is asking people, can I see what got you here? Versus saying, let me review where the review process. And then also making yourself visible. So that comment, like, share is also something I would say. So if I was just starting over, it would be visibility is huge, would be my thing, is making myself visible, and then learning from those who have came before me would be my top if I was starting over.
So you make a good point. And even in the industry right now, we're seeing a lot of layoffs. But I don't know about you, but in my LinkedIn newsfeed, I'm still seeing a lot of people get hired too. And so I think just reaching out to the person who recently got hired and asking them, what kinds of questions did they ask you during the interview? Can I see your resume? Like to see like what got you hired? I want to see that award-winning resume.
I couldn't agree more with that. Don't just hit the generic congrats button. Add a little extra. And it's easier for people to give you the tools that got them there than to try to teach everybody how to get there. So, being resourceful in that way is super important. I see jobs posted all the time, and I just think it's also a matter of people's egos as well of, deciding that a job is beneath them. I know personally, I took a pretty significant pay cut to be in clinical
Me
research.
too.
And I don't think that that's talked about enough. The money's there, but starting out, you're probably going to have to, pack your ego up
Yep.
and just make it work until you can get those skills to start getting that money that everybody brags about.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I tell people too, like, I started out with low pay. I wore many hats. I had another part time job and a per diem job because I had student loans to pay, but I wanted to get into clinical research to get the experience. Did it last forever, all those side jobs? No. But once you get that promotion, the money's coming in now.
Yeah, so especially people with like advanced degrees, I get it. You spend a lot of, time in school. I say everybody should take something that can afford their lifestyle. Nobody wants to work and can't afford their basics.
Right.
But when you're trying to get in, it's always a matter of how much do you really want to be in, because sacrifices have to be made regardless.
Everybody wants the CRA role. They think it's entry level.
Yeah, and then I mean, for the people that want to be CRAs, I just want to let you guys know that that is not a 480-hour work week. So when you divide the actual work week by the money you make, that may be worth a consideration. So I tell people, evaluate how much time you have to put into that job and then break down what that works out for you hourly, because yeah, that's not 40 hours by no means.
So let's talk about like how does the Clinical Research Referral Club empower its members to achieve their career goals like faster?
For me and my mindset is helping people look beyond an employee mindset of just because somebody said this that you have to do it. It does not matter how you get money. That is still, you running a business, you selling your services. So just giving people that confidence in the terms of build your business, and your business is your career, not just I'm going to do this because everybody says I should. People hit milestones at different speeds, or their milestones look different. So just giving them that, lock in on what you want and not what the industry standard is, because just because it's that does not mean that that's your box. So I think, sometimes people be trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And that is where they mess up or get stuck, because they're like, everybody tells me that this should work, but that doesn't even necessarily work for their personality type. So just even understanding your own strengths and, somebody's advice may actually play on your weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. So, what's the most transformational success story you've seen come out of the CRRC and like what made it happen?
I would say the volunteer program is probably one of the ones that I've seen. Initially, it was started by Nicole and Pretty at Cornerstone Clinical Research. So they were coming in the very beginning, and through our networking rounds, they kind of realized that a lot of people were missing that gap. And they had, put in the energy to create the volunteer program. And through that, I have just seen how that's grown and how even more other organizations are willing to, give people an opportunity just to say that they've done something in clinical research. So I would say that that's probably been one of the biggest impacts I've seen, because I know I would have loved to be able to have volunteered when I was getting my foot in the door. I mean, when I started, it was either you're in or you're out. And now at least people don't are just not in or out. You could at least have, a toe in, even if you don't have your whole foot in.
So, let's talk a little bit about how do you balance building genuine relationships with the need to advance your own career and goals? Like, is there a secret formula to doing both?
I would say the secret formula is honesty. Show appreciation, but to also be honest about what my own boundaries are and, what my bandwidth is, and telling people that, that doesn't align with me, but also giving people a solution. I think when you're saying no, and it's not coming from a malicious place, is that, help them where you can, but tell them after this, I cannot walk along this journey with you, just because that is not the path for me.
So, for the listeners out there who are struggling to make those meaningful connections, like what's the one strategy they got to start right now, today?
I'm gonna say do it. That is the one. You cannot get comfortable doing something that you never do. Even, and I'm going to say also, give people something to respond back to. Sometimes the ghosting is because all they can say back to you is okay, and it's not worth their energy to say okay. So just making sure not only that you're doing it, but you're doing it in a way that gives them space to interact with you back. I've seen way too many people that, I see that they want interactions, but they wrote it in a way where it leaves people scratching their heads of how in the world do I respond to this? And if it's too hard, 9 times out of 10, you're just not going to get a response.
Yeah, if it's too hard, if it's too long of a written DM, like we're busy, we're working on clinical trials. Like, is this going to take up too much of my time or is this like an easy answer?
Yes. And then also, kind of proofreading what you wrote. People know when you threw it through AI. And I mean, I love me some AI, but at least also make it look like you put some effort into it, because if you did not put any effort into your outreach, why should that person put effort into reaching back out to you?
Yes, double check your work. Make sure you got the right name because you're copying and pasting and blasting that same DM to 20 other connections.
Oh, and then also read. So if somebody says, "Hey, I want you to take this action," it's very important to probably take the action that they, asked of you, because when you don't do so, that just kind of gives this is probably going to be a difficult relationship because you're already not respecting boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Now, earlier before we hit record, we were talking about AI and the profile pictures on LinkedIn. What are your
Yes.
thoughts on this?
Everybody's profile picture should be a representation of who they are. Nobody likes to get catfished, whether that's romantically or professionally. And I think that builds what would people call that? An idea about who you are. Of you're already not going into the relationship honest. So that leads people to kind of either want to dig deeper and start trying to find the skeletons in your closet, or even just back away, because it's just like, if you're hiding who you are, what else are you hiding? Especially if you plan to go to conferences or even have an interview, because nobody wants to be caught off guard like that.
Yeah, we need a true representation of what you look like.
Yeah, a little filter is fine,
Right.
but you should not walk up to somebody and they be like, "Whoa, I would have never guessed that was you."
What role does mentorship play in your vision for CRRC, and how can others find the right mentors to guide their journey?
I would say mentorship for us, we try to make that people build it organically. So instead of us doing the matchmaking, we more give people the tools of finding a good mentor and what that looks like. Everybody's personality style is different. So when you're looking even online for a mentor, see how they communicate in their posts. See what journey they took, and even if like it's not exact, if you saw that they worked at Starbucks and they were at Starbucks for 5 years, and you know that that's an environment that you would have never thrived in, that's probably not the mentor for you. So even seeing what their previous experience was outside of clinical research can kind of give you an idea of their personality and where they're thriving at. But understanding, how that aligns with yourself and environments that you see yourself being stronger, we can.
So, say you think you found the perfect mentor and you're working with them for 3 months and you realize this isn't what I thought it was. They're not who I thought they were. Or they put a good front up front, but now we have this personality conflict. Like, how do I exit out but still stay cordial?
Honesty. I am all for honesty. You don't have to give it to them harsh like that. Say thank you for your time, and end that. Oftentimes people stay in relationships that don't serve them way too long, and time is the most valuable thing you have. So I just tell people, don't be afraid of saying, I've done this and this is not working for me. And even with that, even if your mentor is, passionate about mentorship, you could still help them by pointing somebody else in their direction so that they can build their skills up. And then if you've had them 3 to 6 months, talk about what's working when what's not working. People cannot improve without feedback. So I know for me, I mentor and I ask my mentees, how can I do this better? Do you need anything from me? Is this still working? So, don't be scared to start those hard conversations, because it can either get you to a place where you're back on the right path, or realizing that, you need to cut your losses and move on. You still learn something. It's just, not the duration that you would have thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Just transparency and honesty.
Yeah.
What's the one piece of advice you would give to anyone listening who wants to make like a real impact in this industry?
I will say be yourself. Nobody else can be you. It's easy, especially with social media, to get caught up on who you think people are. But it's so important to be yourself. People realize when you're faking it, and eventually the mask slips. So, just start off, this is who I am, and refine it. Take the feedback that people give you. If you communicate in a certain way and people give you compliments on that, keep working on that skill. I know for me, people talked about different soft skills I had, and I was like, oh, okay, this soft skill seems to be my winner. Let me develop that. So I'm going to say in your interactions, listen to those compliments, listen to what people say you can work on more. And then that's where you decide to where to put your energy at in your soft skill development.
I want to jump back because I just thought of another question I wanted to ask you. And it goes back to LinkedIn because everybody uses LinkedIn. And there's the key skills and the recommendation section. And say you want to network with past coworkers and you want them to endorse you or write you a recommendation. Like, what's the right way to kind of go about that?
If this was a coworker that you have interacted with daily and you know that you have a good relationship, ask for a reciprocal. Say, hey, can you do this for me? And I'm willing to do it for you. If it's more of a distant one, a good one is send them one first because that will put you on their radar and they are more likely to, send it back. So I'm going to say if it's somebody that you don't really know that well, do it first to them. Start with something obvious like clinical research. Those higher level skills that are more generic, ask for those first before you start asking for those more specific ones because people are putting their name behind you and that follows you.
I always end my show with these last two questions. The first
Okay.
one is, what's your favorite TMF document and why?
Oh, okay. I love that this is you asked me this. So my favorite document is the DOA, so the Delegation Log of Authority. When for me that is the most discussed about document about how to fill it out right. I would say that that's my favorite one. Every site has different rules about who can do what, and sponsors and sites using different templates. So I'm going to say just working in ClinOps, I'm going to say you have to use a lot of problem solving with the delegation, especially when sites want to do their own thing.
And lastly, what's the best career advice that you have received and who's it by?
So I would say it was a recruiter. She was not in clinical research, but her advice was if anybody asks you what your weakness is, never make it a personality trait. Make it a skill because you're less likely to change your personality, but you can always work on a skill.
Ooh, that is good.
Yes. So through that advice, I have been able to really nail some interviews because I could talk about, my weakness and how I was actively working on it, which, put me in a more positive light of saying I have this personality problem that I'm more than likely not going to change.
Exactly. All right, Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on the TMF Daily Podcast and sharing what it takes to be a true networker.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.